I learned I was meant to be a surgeon when I was 12 years old. My grandfather's watch stopped working, and instead of taking it to a repair shop, I disassembled it on my bedroom desk, laid out each tiny piece on a white towel, studied the mechanism, and put it back together. It worked perfectly. My hands had always been steady, my focus unshakable. My name is Eliza Chen, 28 years old, first-generation American with parents who sacrificed everything to come to this country from Shanghai in the early 90s. And from the moment I fixed that watch, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. My parents had different plans. Doctors work too many hours, my father said when I told him about my dream during my sophomore year of high school. They have no family life. No stability. He worked as a civil engineer, home every day by 5:30, never missed a dinner. My mother nodded beside him. Medicine is not for women who want families, she added, though she'd never say this to my brother Michael. You will study business. Finance. Like your cousin Wei. She works at Goldman Sachs now. Beautiful apartment in Manhattan. Married to a nice Chinese boy from a good family. I didn't argue that night. That's not how things worked in our house. My father made pronouncements, we accepted them. So I nodded, excused myself from the table, went to my room, and began planning. Because while I respected my parents, I knew with absolute certainty what I was meant to do with my life. And it wasn't working at Goldman Sachs. The next morning at school, I went to the guidance counselor's office, Mrs. Abernathy, a no-nonsense woman with salt and pepper hair who always wore blazers with shoulder pads. I need to know exactly what it takes to get into medical school, I said without preamble. She raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. 10 minutes later, I walked out with a stack of printouts, required courses, extracurriculars, summer programs, volunteer opportunities, and scholarship information. I folded them carefully and slipped them into my chemistry textbook. That night, I created a separate email account, one my parents would never see. I registered for a summer anatomy class at the community college, paying the $328 tuition with money I'd saved from 3 years of tutoring neighborhood kids in math. I found a volunteer program at the local hospital that accepted high school students. I joined the pre-med club at school but told my parents it was a general science club. I started researching colleges with strong pre-med programs that also offered significant merit scholarships. For the next 2 years, I lived a double life. To my parents, I was the dutiful daughter preparing for a sensible business career. I took AP Economics and joined the Future Business Leaders Club. I wrote essays about entrepreneurship and innovation. But in the hours between school and dinner, in the early mornings before anyone woke up, on weekends when I claimed to be studying at the library, I was building my medical school application. Shadowing doctors at the free clinic. Mastering organic chemistry. Writing research papers on emerging surgical techniques. My father never checked my browser history, never questioned why I spent so many hours studying, never wondered why I was suddenly interested in volunteering at the hospital. My mother noticed I was busy but seemed pleased that I was building my resume. Neither of them suspected I was systematically undermining their plans for my future. Senior year arrived, and with it, college applications. University of Pennsylvania has an excellent business school, my father said over dinner one night. Wharton. Very prestigious. My mother nodded in agreement. Apply there. And NYU. Good connections in New York. I agreed to both, of course. I also applied to Johns Hopkins, Stanford, and Harvard, all known for their pre-med programs, all offering substantial merit scholarships to students with my academic profile. When the acceptance letters came in April, I had decisions to make. I'd been accepted everywhere I applied, with scholarships covering most of the tuition at 3 schools. The obvious choice was Johns Hopkins, prestigious medical program, excellent scholarship, perfect for my goals. But my parents would never allow it. So I chose Harvard instead. They have an excellent joint program, I told my parents. I can study business and economics but also take science courses. Harvard opens all doors. My father was skeptical but eventually relented. The Harvard name was too powerful to resist. What I didn't tell them was that Harvard's excellent joint program was my own invention. While Harvard certainly offered business courses, I had no intention of taking them. I'd already decided on a biochemistry major, with all the pre-med prerequisites carefully scheduled across 8 semesters. The scholarship I'd secured was specifically for students pursuing careers in medicine, though the official letter simply called it a merit award. I wasn't lying, exactly. Just selectively presenting information. The day I moved into my dorm at Harvard, my father helped carry my boxes up 3 flights of stairs. My mother arranged my desk, putting my high school academic awards on display. Before they left, my father squeezed my shoulder and said, "Make us proud. First step to a successful business career." I smiled and promised I would make them proud. That part, at least, wasn't a lie. As soon as their car disappeared from view, I walked to the registrar's office and officially declared my biochemistry major. I signed up for Biology 101, Chemistry 101, Calculus, and a seminar on medical ethics. I joined the Pre-Med Society, applied for a research assistant position in a lab studying cardiac regeneration, and found a volunteer opportunity at Massachusetts General Hospital. By the time I called home that weekend, my path to medical school was already set in motion. When my parents asked about classes, I mentioned my calculus course, talked about the economics textbooks I'd seen in the bookstore, described the business majors I'd met. Not lies, just carefully curated truths. This became my strategy for the next 4 years, tell them enough truth that the omissions didn't feel like deception. Midway through sophomore year, my father asked why my transcript showed so many science courses. Diversifying my education, I explained. Harvard emphasizes a well-rounded approach. These courses complement my business focus. He seemed satisfied with this answer, especially when I mentioned that several banking interns had science backgrounds. Makes sense, he said. Analytical thinking is good for finance. Junior year was harder to explain. My course load was now almost exclusively advanced science classes, my extracurriculars all medically focused. I'd been working in the cardiac lab for 2 years, had co-authored a paper in a respected journal, and was spending 20 hours a week volunteering at the hospital. When my parents visited campus, I had to carefully orchestrate their tour to avoid the labs where I spent most of my time. The real challenge came senior year when medical school applications were due. I needed letters of recommendation from science professors, transcripts showing my pre-med coursework, personal statements about my passion for medicine. There was no way to hide this from my parents anymore. So I didn't try to hide it, I simply didn't tell them. I applied to 12 medical schools, using my own email address, my campus mailing address for correspondence. I paid application fees from my research stipend and savings from summer jobs. I interviewed at medical schools during business conferences and career fairs. By March of senior year, I had been accepted to 5 programs, including Johns Hopkins, my dream school since I was 15. 2 months before graduation, I finally told them. We were sitting in a restaurant near campus, celebrating my business school acceptances that didn't exist. My father was talking about investment banking internships when I interrupted him. "I'm not going into finance," I said quietly. "I've been accepted to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I start in August." The silence that followed was absolute. My father's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mother's smile disappeared. "What are you talking about?" my father finally asked, his voice dangerously calm. "I've always wanted to be a doctor. A surgeon, specifically. I've spent the last 4 years preparing for medical school. My biochemistry degree, my research work, my hospital volunteering, it was all for this. And I got in. Full scholarship." I placed the acceptance letter on the table. My father didn't touch it. "You lied to us," he said. 4 years. My mother was crying silently, dabbing her eyes with her napkin. We gave you everything, she whispered. Everything. I never lied, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I just didn't tell you everything. Because you never gave me a chance to follow my own path. You decided my future when I was 16, without even asking what I wanted. My father stood up abruptly. We're leaving, he said to my mother. Eliza has made her choice. He threw money on the table for the bill and walked out. My mother hesitated, then followed him. Neither looked back at me. For the next 3 months, they didn't return my calls. They sent a check to cover my remaining expenses at Harvard but didn't attend my graduation. My brother Michael came alone, hugged me after the ceremony, and said, they'll come around. Eventually. I wasn't so sure. Medical school was everything I'd hoped for. Challenging, exhausting, exhilarating. I excelled in anatomy, spent extra hours in the cadaver lab, impressed my professors with my steady hands and precise work. By the end of first year, I was at the top of my class. I sent my grades to my parents' house in Connecticut. The envelope came back unopened, marked return to sender. During my second year, my roommate Claire noticed I was quieter than usual. Everything okay? She asked one night as we were studying. I showed her the latest envelope, returned unopened. It's been 18 months, I said. I thought they might. I didn't finish the sentence. Claire squeezed my shoulder. Some people need more time. I threw myself into my studies with even more determination. If my parents couldn't be proud of me, I would be proud enough for all of us. I applied for competitive research positions, presented at conferences, published papers. When it came time to apply for residency, I set my sights on the most prestigious surgical programs in the country. The night before my Johns Hopkins residency interview, I got a call from an unknown number. Eliza? It was my brother. It's Dad. He had a heart attack. He's at Yale New Haven Hospital. They're saying he needs surgery. My hand tightened around the phone. How bad? I asked. Michael hesitated. Bad. They're talking about a triple bypass. Mom's falling apart. I caught the last train to New Haven, arrived at the hospital just after midnight. My mother was sitting alone in the waiting room, looking smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, she didn't stand, didn't smile, just watched as I approached. Michael called you, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. How is he? She looked down at her hands. Surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Doctor says there's significant damage. I sat beside her, not touching, the 2 years of silence between us like a physical barrier. I'd like to speak with his doctors, I said. If that's okay. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. They said they'd come by at 6 a.m. for final consultation before surgery. We sat in silence for hours. Around 3 a.m., my mother finally spoke. Your father is very stubborn. I almost smiled. So am I thought. I get it from him. He was so angry when you chose medicine, she continued. Not because of the career itself. Because you went behind our backs. He felt betrayed. I tried to tell you both what I wanted, I said quietly. Many times. You never listened. My mother sighed. We thought we knew better. We wanted security for you. Happiness. Medicine makes me happy, I replied. It always has. My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Are you happy? I thought about my life at Johns Hopkins, the satisfaction of solving medical puzzles, the thrill of successful diagnoses, the purpose I felt every day. Yes, I said. I am. She nodded slowly. Your father will not admit it, but he has followed your career. The papers you published. He has them all in his desk drawer. This surprised me. He reads medical journals now? My mother almost smiled. He has alerts set up for your name. Every time you publish something, he prints it. Reads it 3, 4 times, though he understands very little of it. He is proud, in his way. Too proud to say it. At 6 a.m., my father's cardiologist arrived, a serious woman in her 50s with short gray hair. As she began explaining the procedure, I asked specific questions about his arterial blockages, about the surgical approach they planned to use, about postoperative care. The doctor looked at me curiously. "Are you in medicine?" she asked. Before I could answer, my mother said, "My daughter is graduating from Johns Hopkins Medical School this year. Top of her class." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. I glanced at her, surprised, and saw something soften in her expression. She always had steady hands, my mother added. Even as a child. After the doctor left, my mother took my hand. "Your father's surgery is scheduled for 10 a.m. It will be several hours. There's time for you to see him before, if you want." I hesitated. "Does he want to see me?" My mother squeezed my hand. "He asked for you. Last night, before they sedated him. He asked if Michael had called you." My father looked smaller in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to beeping machines. His eyes were closed when I entered, but they opened as I approached. For a moment, he just looked at me. "Then, you came." His voice was weaker than I remembered. I nodded. "Of course I came." He gestured weakly to the chair beside the bed. I sat down, unsure what to say after so much silence. Finally, he spoke again. "Your mother says you're graduating soon." Another nod from me. "Surgical residency next?" I was surprised he knew this. "Yes. Interviews start next week, actually." I had to reschedule Johns Hopkins. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Always Johns Hopkins with you. Since you were 15. He knew that too? "They have an excellent cardiac program," I said. My father's eyes held mine. "You would be good at that. Fixing hearts." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning beyond the medical. "I'd like to think so," I replied softly. He was quiet for a long moment, then, "I was wrong, Eliza." The admission stunned me. My father never admitted mistakes. "About?" I asked, though I knew. "About medicine. About what would make you happy." He reached for my hand, his grip weak but determined. "You found your path. Without my help. Despite my interference." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I learned persistence from you," I said. "And determination." His eyes glistened too. "Too much, perhaps?" I shook my head. "Just enough." When they came to take him to surgery, my mother and I walked alongside the gurney to the elevator. Before the doors closed, my father caught my hand once more. "Next time," he said, his voice barely audible, "you'll be the one performing the surgery." It wasn't quite an apology, and it wasn't quite a blessing, but coming from my father, it was enough. My father's recovery was slow but steady. I delayed my return to Johns Hopkins by 2 weeks, helping manage his care, explaining procedures to my mother, translating medical jargon into terms they could understand. By the time I left for Baltimore, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, there were still too many unspoken hurts, but understanding, perhaps. A recognition of who we all were, imperfect, stubborn, but ultimately family. I matched with Johns Hopkins for my surgical residency, specializing in cardiothoracic surgery. The hours were brutal, the work demanding beyond anything I'd experienced before. There were nights I questioned my choice, days when exhaustion made me wonder if my father had been right about medicine all along. But then there would be a successful surgery, a patient whose life we saved, a family grateful for our intervention, and I would remember why I fought so hard for this path. 3 years into my residency, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Dr. Chen," a formal voice asked when I answered. "This is Dr. Angela Reynolds, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Yale New Haven Hospital." My stomach tightened. "Is it my father?" I asked immediately. "Has something happened?" There was a pause, then a small laugh. "No, nothing like that. Your father is fine, as far as I know. I'm calling about a position." Dr. Reynolds explained that Yale was expanding their cardiothoracic department, looking for promising residents who might want to complete their training there and potentially join the staff. "Your name keeps coming up," she said. "Your research on minimally invasive valve replacement techniques is impressive. And your surgical skills are apparently exceptional." I was stunned. "How did you hear about me?" I asked. Dr. Reynolds hesitated. "Well, initially from Dr. Patterson at Johns Hopkins. But I must admit, your father has also been quite persistent. He sent me every paper you've published. Called my office several times to suggest I look at your work." My father. The man who had once forbidden me from pursuing medicine was now actively advocating for my career. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I see," was all I could manage to say. Dr. Reynolds continued, "We'd like you to come for an interview. No pressure, just a conversation about possibilities." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Dr. Reynolds' office at Yale, discussing innovative surgical approaches and department dynamics. As we wrapped up, she said casually, "Your father comes to our cardiology support group, you know. Talks about his daughter, the brilliant surgeon, to anyone who'll listen." I blinked in surprise. "He does?" She nodded. "He brought in that article from the Journal of Cardiothoracic Surgery where they featured your team's work. Practically did a presentation on it. Not sure he understood all the technical aspects, but he certainly got the significance." I accepted Yale's offer the following week. Not because of my father, the program genuinely aligned with my research interests and career goals, but the proximity to my family was admittedly a factor. When I called my parents to tell them, my mother cried. My father simply said, "They're lucky to have you." From him, it was everything. On my first day at Yale New Haven Hospital, I stopped by the cardiology ward. My father's former surgeon, Dr. Patel, recognized me immediately. "The famous Dr. Chen," she said with a smile. "Your father told me you'd be joining us." I laughed. "Is there anyone in this hospital he hasn't told?" Dr. Patel's expression grew serious. "You know, when he was recovering from his surgery, he asked me endless questions about the procedure, about medical training, about what it takes to become a surgeon. At first, I thought he was just processing his own experience, but then he mentioned you. Said his daughter was going to be a surgeon despite his best efforts to prevent it. He seemed regretful." I nodded slowly. "We had a complicated relationship with my career choice." Dr. Patel smiled. "Well, he's certainly your biggest advocate now. Last month, he brought a prospective patient to me. His golf buddy needed valve replacement, and he specifically requested that you be consulted when you arrived. Said, and I quote, 'My daughter pioneered a minimally invasive technique that would be perfect for this case.' 6 months later, I performed my first solo valve replacement surgery at Yale. As I scrubbed in, the nurse mentioned that there were observers in the gallery. I glanced up briefly and saw them, my mother, my father, and my brother, sitting in the front row. My father raised his hand in a small wave. I nodded in acknowledgement, then turned my focus to the task ahead. Hours later, after the successful surgery, after the patient was stable in recovery, after I'd spoken with the family, I found my parents waiting in the surgeon's lounge. My father stood as I entered. "That was..." He seemed to search for the right word. Remarkable, he finally said. Your hands, so steady. So sure. He reached out and took my hands in his, examining them as if seeing them for the first time. These were meant for this work, he said quietly. I see that now. My mother stepped forward then, hugged me tightly. We are so proud, she whispered. So very proud. Over her shoulder, I met my father's eyes. He nodded once, definitive. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. My victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was showing them another way to be right, about happiness, about success, about what it means to live a purposeful life. Last week, 5 years after joining Yale, I was named the youngest Director of Cardiothoracic Innovation in the hospital's history. The press release mentioned my research, my surgical innovations, my commitment to patient care. At the small celebration afterward, my father stood in the corner, watching as colleagues congratulated me. When the crowd thinned, he approached, handed me a small box. This seemed appropriate, he said. Inside was my grandfather's watch, the one I had fixed when I was 12 years old. I looked at my father, questioning. You kept it? He nodded. I should have known then, he said simply. Some hands are meant to fix things. To heal. He fastened the watch around my wrist. Perfect fit, he said, and I understood he meant more than just the watch. The most satisfying revenge isn't making others suffer for underestimating you. It's proving, through quiet excellence, through unwavering dedication, that you knew your own heart all along. It's standing in your truth so firmly that eventually, even those who opposed you must acknowledge it. My parents forbade my dream career, so I took matters into my own hands. And now those hands save lives, one heart at a time,